We were simply marching through the area to appeal to the white people.
We were not responsible for the violence. The march itself was inherently violent and intimidatory. We set out to oppose their march. We did not set out to fight with the police.
Mr. Tyndall, the darling of Hitler. Mr. Tyndall, who dresses in Hitler's uniform.
We are committed to attempting to stop these intimidatory marches
by the use of violence yourself.
Without violence, if possible.
Many people believe that marches of this nature should be banned.
If we start to adopt that view, we're going towards the end of democracy in this country.
For the past week and more, the biggest issue in this country has been violence in the streets, political violence. It's overtaken what British people usually argue about, money and wages and prices. Two small political parties, the National Front on one extreme and the Socialist Workers Party on the other, have caught the headlines by trying to fight each other and catching the police in the middle in London and Birmingham. At a stroke, they have the police at full stretch, and they call into question what most people had taken for granted: the right to hold political meetings, the right to hold political demonstrations. We've carried out an opinion poll on what people think about those rights. We want to show, too, some of the evidence about violence in the streets, about what has actually happened. We don't have all the evidence in our pictures, and we are certainly not judges. But we want to show you not just film of a riot from which we all take vivid impressions, but to slow bits down, to stop and think with the people who were organizing the demonstrations about just what the cameras show was going on. The question this program asks, and we don't pretend to have the full answer, is, are we watching legitimate political expression, or are we watching the deliberate provocation of violence? First, the fighting in Lewisham in South London. Why do the National Front put their main effort into places like Lewisham and Ladywood? Their critics say it's because they want to intimidate the black population there. The National Front claim is that they mean to eclipse the Liberals as the third party in the country. They beat the Liberals in a third of the constituencies in the Greater London Council elections this year. They did it again at the Ladywood by-election. Lewisham, a place where many black immigrants live and where unemployment is high, is where the National Front has had some political success too. Lewisham is also a place where there are many black people unemployed, a place where the Anglican Church and the local Labour Party politicians have been worried about race relations, and where the Socialist Workers Party have felt they can recruit too on race, on unemployment, and on the class structure of the country. The National Front said they'd march through Lewisham. They said it'd be peaceful. The police asked them to cancel it. They said they wouldn't. The Socialist Workers planned a march to end up where the National Front were to start. They said the National Front were trying to intimidate black people. The police said they couldn't allow that. Lord Justice Scarman, ruling on the last riot in Red Lion Square, had said marches and counter-marches must be kept apart. That's what the police tried to do in Lewisham. They blocked off the end of Clifton Rise to keep the counter-demonstrators away from the National Front. The National Front were diverted along Achilles Street and then along Pagnell Street to resume their route. When the counter-demonstrators cottoned onto this, they moved down the street, the A2, to catch the National Front at the corner. The big crowd in the New Cross Road, but an orderly one so far, waiting for the National Front march. The police are getting ready too. A smoke bomb is lobbed in. It's meant to confuse. police bring up horses to clear the way. The first missiles are thrown. There's a fight in the crowd. The police line wavers, but it's quite friendly here. The crowd go back. Not friendly now as arrests are made. The crowd are blocking the march route. The police get their man across using truncheons. Then a flour bomb. The fighting grows, but mostly individual fighting, fists flying. A new weapon, an ammonia spray. It blinds. Seven police need treatment for the ammonia. The National Front are drawn up, the Union Jack much in evidence. The police switch the march to a side street, Achilles Street. The crowd sets off in pursuit of the march. As they round the corner, the sticks and stones are coming in, chiefly from the back of the crowd. Police keep the crowd from the rear of the procession. He goes in to get the flag. All the time, the stones go into the marchers. A middle-aged marcher returns fire.
Get back to Germany!
mounted policeman goes down. So does this horse. The police get their protective shields, the first time in Britain. 56 police were treated in hospital afterwards. 210 people were arrested. Over 160 of them didn't live in southeast London. We all have our own impression of what happened in that film, what the violence was like, who did what, perhaps what started it. But it may help to slow some key pieces down and get the explanations of the organisers of the march and of the counter-demonstration. I put the question first to the chairman of the Socialist Workers Party, Mr. John Hallas. Mr. Hallas, I'd like to show you a first piece of film of the Lewisham march and counter-demonstration. And this is where the police first bring in their horses and, as they try to clear a way for what was deemed to be a lawful march, the first missiles come in from the right. And as the police try to make progress, more are thrown. And if we watch the right-hand corner of the screen, we can see in a moment somebody with his arm back and poised to throw. And the missile is in the air. Now, do you condone that violence? Do you intend to persist in it in future demonstrations?
Well, I'm bound to say that we were not responsible for the violence. The march itself was inherently violent and intimidatory. It was in an area deliberately chosen with a predominantly immigrant, predominantly black population, and the whole object of these marches, as with Mosley's marches in the 30s, he marched in areas with a predominantly Jewish population. The Jews were the villains. For the National Front, the blacks are the villains. There are more of them. They're more obvious. They're a better scapegoat. The violence is inherent in that. We set out to oppose their march. We did not set out to fight with the police.
But you are now committed to violence on this march and every other march to come.
We are committed to attempting to stop these intimidatory marches.
By the use of violence yourself?
By our presence, without violence if possible.
And then the behaviour of the organisers of the march, the National Front. What were they really after, and what were their people really marching for? I put it to their chairman, Mr. John Tyndall. Mr. Tyndall, I'd like to show you a piece of film about that march in Lewisham. We'll slow it down so that you can see all the incident. It's when a small boy rushes out through the crowd and snatches one of your many Union Jacks from one of your colleagues. He takes the flag, your man comes after him, seeking to mix it. Others join in, and your chap seems to get the worst of it. Now, he gets the worst of it there, but don't you think, marching like that through a black immigration area, you're simply encouraging a punch-up?
Certainly not. We were marching through that area not to provoke the blacks, but to appeal to the whites. If we had used an insulting language against the blacks as a race, then that might have been called provocative. We were simply marching through the area to appeal to the white people. And I don't think you can say that that remotely justifies the kind of violence that was practiced upon us on Saturday.
Many people, including white people in Lewisham, believe that marches of this nature should be banned. If they were banned, would you and your party obey?
I can understand the feelings of the ordinary people of Lewisham. I can understand them well and sympathize with them. But if we really think about this, the proposition that marches should be banned because of violence caused not by those marchers, but by people who organize well in advance to smash those marches up, if we start to adopt that view, we're going towards the end of democracy in this country.
But if it was a general view, if it was passed by Parliament, you would obey the ban?
We would have to obey the law. We are a party that obeys the law. But I would suggest that what are banned are not demonstrations, but counter-demonstrations in the same area, in the same time, where they may lead to violence.
There is an impression that some of your people are happy only when they're mixing it. I'd like to show you another piece of film. This again is along the line of march in Lewisham. The stones are coming in upon the marchers, and one of your militants returns the fire, and returns it, I would put it to you, in a fairly expert and accustomed way. There's the stoning going on of the march, and your man comes in on the left, throwing it back. Looks middle-aged. He's down again for some more to throw. Now, is that man really concerned with the law, with persuasion, or is he a street fighter?
The difference is that the people throwing the stones were organized well in advance to commit acts of violence. That man there, my colleague, was simply reacting as any normal human being would react if people attacked him in that way. I think your suggestion that our members are happy because of that sort of thing is, with respect, Mr. Burnet, absurd. He was merely reacting as any normal person would do to that kind of provocation.
Ladywood in Birmingham is, like Lewisham, a place of urban decay, unemployment and black immigration. It's also been having a by-election, adding to the political ambition of the smaller parties. All eyes that have been awake have been on it. Mrs. Thatcher's been there, Mr. Foote, Mr. Whitelaw, Mr. Hattersley. The National Front put up a candidate. The Socialist Workers put up a West Indian activist. The Socialist Unity Party put up an Asian shop steward. And an independent West Indian, Mr. James Hunt, stood saying Caribbean people should go back to the Caribbean if they want to. The National Front said they had the right to hold political meetings there like any other party. Not a march, a political meeting like the Tories and the Labour Party do. The police have no power to stop that. The Representation of the People Act says it's lawful. At one meeting, the Socialist Unity candidate was taken away by the police when he protested. Then, at a National Front meeting on Monday, at a school on the border of the constituency, which was a polling station yesterday, serious fighting began, as it had at Lewisham just 2 days before. People knew there'd be trouble, but just how much? There were slogans on the wall and posters to be put up, not quite like other by-elections. Far-sighted people reckoned it could be bad and boarded up the windows. The Asian population had votes, but they knew they were the issue too. The police kept a low profile at first. Then the Socialist Unity demonstrators arrived.
Mr. Tyndall tonight, the darling of Hitler. Mr. Tyndall, who dresses in Hitler's uniform.
Some of the people who'd come to try to stop the meeting brought sticks and staves with them. A man in a red shirt gets down off the loudspeaker van. There'd been a push at the police line. Now sticks and stones and bottles were thrown. The police had no protection. The counter-demonstrators' stewards were active in calling for calm, but it seemed they couldn't control the people on the fringes. The police brought up a new line with protective shields to take over from the unprotected ones. It was a crowd that seemed ready for anything, not just a political crowd. A stray fight broke out when two young men pushed their way through. The The police decided their front line needed to be ready for anything. But then the crowd heard the National Front were getting into the school the back way. They moved off to try to stop them. The National Front leaders had no difficulty. The crowd tried to make it difficult. They ripped up a fence for ammunition. And then the police started to make arrests. Again, the crowd stoned the police, among them a lone black policeman at the school.
I have come around from them, right, that you should stop your meeting. If you did not stop the meeting of the National Front, then our people will go on marching and there will be more trouble which we can't control. I have tried to control it already, right? And they will keep on marching until the meeting is stopped.
As you can see, the people there are very
Yes,
militant.
well, we're not in charge of political meetings.
Inside the school, the National Front meeting went on, well attended. The next morning, no politicians, no demonstrators, no police. The debris had to be picked up, and the questions about a part of British society were left to be answered.
How was it?
The National Front, as we've seen, were all inside the school most of the time. It was the demonstrators outside who seemed to set the pace. What were they really after? To answer, Mr. Hallas of the Socialist Workers Party again. Mr. Hallas, looking at the demonstration in Ladywood by the Socialist Unity Party and your own Socialist Workers Party, I'd like to draw your attention in this piece of film to how some of the demonstrators arrived and what they were carrying. Those seem to me to be sticks. Some people might consider them offensive weapons. If you go on, is that going to be the face of Britain for the coming years?
In general, we are not interested in fascist meetings. We don't set out to disrupt fascist meetings, but it has to be said, of course, that this particular meeting was organised not actually in the constituency, you know.
Well, that school was in fact a polling station in the by-election, so I don't think you can really use that as an argument.
OK, it is in Handsworth, but still, never mind, in an area which is overwhelmingly immigrant, in a constituency in which, I believe, according to the press, 40% of the population are coloured, and the National Front's campaign, look at the Birmingham Post, the Birmingham Mail, the reports, 90% the stirring up of race hatred. And though in general I am not in favour of chasing the fascists all around the country, attempting to disrupt their meetings and so on, it has to be said that any demonstration against this systematic attempt to stir up race hatred is justified.
But this was an election campaign and an election meeting. Now, I'd like you to look at the police defending that election meeting against demonstrators, against the onslaught of bottles and stones and sticks. The police are themselves unprotected. No policeman has drawn a baton or anything like that. The police are just having to stand still and take it. Is that an exercise of political sense? Is it an exercise for law-abiding people?
It is, I think, inherent, unfortunately, in the whole situation whereby you say it's an election meeting, yes it is, where their election campaign is based on stirring up race hatred.
But now here, the stewards at the front are trying to calm the crowd down. Now, will you stand by those stewards now and say publicly you would like your party to cool it?
We are not in favour of the use of violence against political opponents in general. We reject it out of hand. On the other hand, we do not regard the fascists as political opponents in the sense that the Tories, etc., are political opponents.
The law is not wholly silent about political violence. It's an offence under the Criminal Law Act to have offensive weapons at political meetings. It's an offence under the Race Relations Act to stir up hatred against any racial group. And the Public Order Act, written 41 years ago, empowers the Home Secretary to ban marches and processions, though there's nothing to stop lawful political meetings. That's under the Representation of the People Act. But the police insist that even if a march were banned, they have no power in advance to stop mobs assembling and then fighting each other. All the police can do is to try to arrest them for offences afterwards. That's the law. What does the public think? In a special poll for us by the Opinion Research Centre taken after the demonstrations, we asked, do you think that any political group, however extreme its views, which feels strongly about a subject, should have the right to march in support of its views? 54% said yes, they should have the right to march. 46% said no. We excluded don't knows. But in a second question, the view changed radically. We asked, if a march by a political group in an area is thought likely to cause disturbances, do you think it should be banned? The reply, yes, it should be banned, came from 87%. No, it shouldn't be banned, only 13%. Again, we excluded don't knows. Who would be responsible for any banning? The public seemed to think it's a political decision. 46% said the government should do it, 31% the local police, 11% the law courts, 8% the local council, 4% had other ideas. We found 97% of people, that's almost everyone, had heard of the disturbances in Lewisham and Ladywood. But who was thought most to blame? 41% thought the opponents of the march were to blame. 23% said the organisers of the march. Only 5% blamed the police, 12% blamed others, and 19% said they didn't know. And what did the voters of Ladywood think? Well, 80% of them, 4 out of 5 who voted Labour or Conservative, as they usually do. The number of votes cast for the National Front, the Socialist Unity Party and the Socialist Workers Party put together came to 1,600, just 10%. But what that 10% has done this summer has been to put violence into the forefront of British politics. We needn't expect this violence to go away, so it puts 3 questions to all of us. First, should the law be altered? Second, should there be more policemen and bigger and better weapons in police hands? And third, should not we all, when we feel deeply enough to demonstrate, look more carefully as we can, at the real aims and ambitions of those whose company we keep? Good evening.